Please welcome the outstanding political commentator, and I can't wait to get his takes on what's happening. He has met his moment, it would seem, on this day. Jared Sexton, everybody. Hello, sir.
What a welcome. It's all downhill from here.
I think you'll hit the ball. How's that? I'm not at all concerned.
I mean, I hope I can live up to that confidence. It's great being here.
Yeah, look, I've loved your stuff for so long, and I think your takes on Trump and the first go round with Trump, I thought they were so smart, and the evolution really of American politics that gave rise to Trump. I for one was, and maybe it was just paranoia, always feared that Trump would rise again, even though it to me is one of the most remarkable political stories in the history of the country that this guy has again risen to power with sort of an unapologetic grievance-filled platform. So now he's back in power, and I'll just cut right to then where we are. He's unleashed this insanely powerful guy in Elon Musk in what I think is a coup of sorts. I mean, it's a government takeover, unauthorized. I mean, I guess authorized implicitly by the president, the new president, but it's a takeover of the sort that we're just not really familiar with, turning his people loose to download personal information from so many American taxpayers and American businesses and corporations. It's on a level of insane takeover that I don't think we can really, put into any pre-existing category, Jared.
Well, I really appreciate you framing it that way because it is absolutely a coup. And I think the key to understanding how all of this is happening is, first off, we have to realize that Donald Trump is not the orchestrator behind this. He is not the brains behind this project. It's more or less looking at Ronald McDonald and thinking that he runs the McDonald's Corporation. Right. The entire point is that Donald Trump has a faux populistic cult of personality, and that cult of personality has been bought by Elon Musk and a group of oligarchs who have gained unprecedented wealth and power, not just in terms of the actual money that they have, but the control over federal infrastructure and the mechanics of empire. It's been building for a very, very long time. This more or less is a hostile takeover. And it's important that the first thing we do is we stop thinking about the United States of America. If this was happening in a so-called second or third world country, we would understand what's occurring, right? And I always invite people to imagine any number of articles that they've read about some country in a quote unquote second or third world part of the country where a complete and utter, incompetent fool, bozo clown has been elected into a position. And we, reading the newspaper and the coverage of it, understand that there's a group of wealthy people behind him who are using him to plunder resources and to enrich themselves. We understand that when it happens in other countries. We have a hard time with it because we're the United States of America and it couldn't possibly happen here, and because we lionize and mythologize the presidency. As a result, we have to imagine that Donald Trump is the person behind this. And Elon Musk, don't worry, guys, they'll have a falling out at some point, right? Like, he'll get tired of Elon Musk, even though he's given him hundreds of millions of dollars, and his help has now given him tens of billions of dollars, teaching him how to use crypto and other such scams. So what we're dealing with right now is an oligarchical coup, and unfortunately, we need to reconsider the way we look at our politics now.
There's a demand on the part of many to have the Democrats do something. Like, why aren't the Democrats more loudly making a point of what's going on? Why aren't the Democrats pushing back legislatively, even though they're in the minority? I understand that. I kind of get that. I'm more astounded, but perhaps I shouldn't be, especially based on what you've just kind of said. I mean, I think that there are a lot of people are just basically scared in the GOP as well, a party that's been completely taken over by MAGA. And so, Democrats are one thing, but the GOP has been taken over by this guy as well, and no one's saying a peep.
Yeah, the Republican Party has more or less become a public relations front for the wealth class in this country. And, we have a little bit of time here, but we can't get completely into the weeds. This has been a decades-long attack on representative government, the destruction of the federal government by the wealth class through think tanks, institutes. People know the Kochs, the Mercers, all of that. Unfortunately, they created a mutant species, this oligarchical class, that fed them tens of billions of dollars and hundreds of billions of dollars and soon to be trillions of dollars. And really quickly, I just want to get people up to speed on this. There's a variety of reasons why the Democratic Party is not meeting this moment. Number one, they helped create it. And that's some tough love, but they had a chance to regulate these people at the beginning of the so called new economy, whenever they would have Musk and Zuckerberg and Bezos to Capitol Hill, and they would basically just make hard eyes at them and ask them tough questions like, how did you get so great? Right? So, in order to talk about that, it would need some introspection. Also, add to it, we're talking about Elon Musk, who has integrated himself so thoroughly into our government that he basically runs our space agencies. He helps run our national security state, our military industrial complex. As a result, you can't even talk about him necessarily without going ahead and talking about the infrastructure of government. So, what we have in this situation is we have the two main political parties, one of which is absolutely an authoritarian, fascistic power cult run by the wealthy. And the other side, and we've seen this throughout history, the opposition oftentimes is either too afraid or unwilling to get into what is going on, which leaves a lot of us to feel like we have no representation. And I think this is true, that we have to do something ourselves.
And it is true, I think, Jared, that if we, excuse me, just clear my throat. It is true that if we make enough noise, I think there can be modifications and even pullback on some of these positions, particularly from Trump, who doesn't like a lot of a political headwind in the form of a social media outcry and a media static of any kind that's coming from the populace. Don't you agree?
I absolutely do. And I want to make a couple of things clear, because what we are talking about is an authoritarian push. And the past couple of weeks have been a blitz, right? It's been this abusive push that is meant to rub our noses in this and make it feel like all of it is inevitable. I want to make a couple of things clear. First of all, these people are cowards. They are weak-willed human beings, which is why they turn to authoritarianism. All I want to do is invite people to think about the idea of a bully. And we all know, once we grow older and we have some perspective, what are bullies? Insecure people who act tough in order to hide who they are. The entire point of this, and we saw this during the first Trump administration, we've seen it throughout. When you actually stand up and punch these people in the face, they back down quickly. And so what we have to do is to let go of all this doomerism and pessimism and cynicism and saying it's all over. This, the deal's already done. They've already won. We ourselves have to make a stink about this. And one thing that people come to understand, if they actually look at politics and how they work the cycles of this stuff, they come to understand that we have incredible power over how things are perceived, and politics moves and changes as the Overton window changes. We can change it. We can slide it. We cannot just sit back and just sort of shrug our shoulders and say, what are you going to do?
Yeah. What does that pushback look like in you know, in an age where, you can sort of in a depressingly bleak way look at the fact that Musk has control over X. Now you've got Zuckerberg, who in some kind of transactional supplicance is given over Facebook, or at least an implicit giving over Facebook to getting rid of fact checkers and it would seem right-wing propaganda. He has Instagram too. I mean, you begin to run out of options for a lot of that, at least social media protest. What does the pushback you're talking about look like?
Well, I want to start by saying this. And Mark, I really appreciate having this conversation. And for the record, I really appreciate the work that you do, because the things in these moments that I do appreciate is honesty. And I do appreciate people being earnest about it, right? We have treated so much of this in our media, our corporate media, as entertainment, right? Tune in at 7 p.m., 8 p.m. and see what Trump did today. And then it turns into a law and order transactional in which, like, oh, don't worry, this investigation will get him, or this institution will take him down. Just wait until the season finale. The entire point here is we have to stop treating this like a spectator sport. We have to stop yelling at the Democrats, hey, do something. Hey, media, you published this thing. Why would you say this? That does a lot for social media, right? Like, it allows you to get a bunch of likes, retweets, and reposts, all of that good stuff. What I'm actually talking about at this point is what history teaches us authoritarianism requires, which is small d democratic action. So anybody listening to this at home and watching this at home, you need to understand, you need to talk to local leaders. You need to talk about people at your schools. You need to talk to people in your workplace, and you need to demand from them answers about what they're going to do to stand up to this stuff when it seeps into your system, because it always does. Instead of having the meeting where your boss or administrator or a school, principal tells you, we're really sorry about this and we're trying to do whatever we can. You need to create a countervailing force. And you need to have conversations with people about what the red line in the sand is. South Korea gave us a hell of a demonstration of what you do when authoritarianism comes to your country, which is the moment it rears its ugly head, you get in the streets. And things change very quickly. There was a coup attempt in South Korea that got put down in hours because the people came out of their homes and they said absolutely not. So we need to stop relying on our politicians and our media and our institutions, and we need to start banking on small d democratic action.
It's interesting. I'm just seeing this in response. I want to try to pull it. Joan says the problem is that every time I post truth, it gets removed by YouTube because MAGA trolls report it. I posted my opinion of what needs to happen the other day and couldn't post for a day. It is true that you think social media is sort of this neutral platform, even the platform we're on, YouTube, but it's not. It really isn't. It's a
No,
fragile one.
and quite frankly, we need to understand that the public space has been purchased by the wealth class who's carrying all this out. Like, it's not a coincidence, of course, that Elon Musk bought Twitter or X or whatever we want to call it at this moment. It's not a coincidence that Donald Trump is now literally talking about buying TikTok in order to turn it into a state-run propaganda device, or that Facebook is on this side, or that we're seeing things like MSNBC, they're getting ready to be sold off for spare parts. The entire point is that the wealth class has purchased all of the organs of communication in terms of mainstream communication. These are not free and fair open spaces. We can use them. We can use them for communication, educational, and organizational opportunities, but we have to stop relying on them as simply being the only way that we can speak out against this thing or get our information.
Do you, as you game this out, Jared Sexton, do you see any kind of pushback being successful even in the short or medium term here? As this is only we lose track. He's done so much. There's been so much wreckage in this first 10 days. How do you game it out? Like, how successful could some sort of reasonable pushback be?
Well, Mark, first of all, I want to go ahead and lay my cards on the table. When I have conversations like this, I've sort of earned a moniker as like a prophet of doom. Like, I just look at all this and I see all the problems, and that's unfortunately my cross to bear. It's part of being hyper aware, right? Like, keeping track. There's a reason why I've been on this beat for a while, but to be honest, I'm very optimistic. And I'm optimistic for the variety of reasons. People understand that this isn't right. They see the cruelty of it. They see the corruption of it. And on top of that, Mark, there's also the added bonus. They're not being very clever about this. They're not hiding this. They're making it very clear that a billionaire has purchased the American presidency and he's serving to further the interest of the oligarchical class. History tells us there is always a backlash to this. People do not like to be ruled openly. The question at this point is, what is that backlash going to look like? I do think there's going to be collective action. I do think there are going to be strikes. I do think that there are going to be protests in the street. The question, and this is what history always asks of us, what is that going to look like? Is it going to be short? Is it going to be pummeled by violence and state-sponsored violence? Or are the people eventually going to turn the tables on this thing? I happen to believe it's the latter. I happen to think that we are going to win this thing, but I'm not going to lie to people and sugarcoat it and say that it's not going to be ugly, that there is not going to be violence, that there is not going to be a gathering crisis that we're already in and it's going to get worse. But I do think that there is going to be a backlash. And I think overall, in one way, shape, or another, we are going to pull this thing out.
That's super encouraging, especially, as you say, coming from you, because you can, you detail so beautifully the flaws in the system and the way it's evolved in a flawed way to this moment. I don't know, maybe I'm hopeful. I come at it with such little faith in this culture. I think the culture of America, I love Americans. I love people. I know that that's not just something I say. I mean, I just try to engage with everyone I can if the moment permits it. But I'm making a broader point, which is the culture is one that does lead to apathy. It does lead to inertia. And you look at our voting participation, you can see it. I mean, look at how disengaged we are from current events. Most of what we're talking about, the majority of Americans have no sense of whatsoever. They don't give an S about it. They're worried about the Chiefs and the Eagles in the Super Bowl. I mean, this is the culture we're in. So to see the kind of rising up that you're talking about is to see a part of the culture that I don't see in evidence much day to day.
Well, first of all, I completely agree. And the reason that this is happening, I want to make it clear again. I said it earlier, I want to say it again. Trump is a symptom of a much larger disease. People say, well, how does this happen? He's an aberration. No, Donald Trump could not become president of the United States of America if there were not material conditions that led to it. A large part of it, this is not just a political crisis. This is not just a democratic crisis, nor is it an economic crisis. It's a crisis of meaning and purpose. We have a situation in this country where for 40 years we have redistributed tens of trillions of dollars from the middle and working classes to the wealthiest individuals. That's how we've arrived here. Over time, people have rightfully, and people always say to me, can you believe that Donald Trump eroded trust in our institutions and in our legal system and our political system? No, they earned that distrust. And this is an expression of that distrust. So people need to understand that we have been made to feel powerless and alone. And that, by the way, has benefited the wealthy who have been able to pay us less in order to get rid of labor unions and to increasingly make our standard of living worse and worse, which, for the record, they're trying to crater our standard of living right now. That is a large part of this, so they can drive down wages and get rid of everything from OSHA to Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, you name it. The entire point is to divide and then conquer. Where I gain hope, first of all, is a conversation like this. And I want anybody listening to this to imagine that this conversation taking place in sometime like 2010, right? Because what we are doing is we're educating ourselves on what has happened. We're moving past conventional narratives that have been fairy tales and mythologies. On top of that, look around the country. Young people with no professional organizing experience are organizing their workplaces. They're defeating Amazon. They're defeating Starbucks. They're defeating the largest corporations in the history of the world. And why? It's not because they're part of a political party. It's not because they're being helped necessarily by organizers. It's because they recognize that this thing is not fair and people are dying for hope and something to belong to. All we need to do is figure out what that thing is that gives us hope and something to belong to. It's the counterbalance to fascism, which is always about giving people hope, even though it's a lie. This is about creating a renewal of hope and purpose and making us interconnected once more.
That is a really compelling argument, and it mentions something which I think is truly a viable force that is emerging, and that's the next generation. I feel as though the young generation, those who have been empowered and activated by the climate crisis, what they actually see and are going to live, they may be the future. Social safety nets are in peril, says Early Love. Yo, that's certainly true. I mean, I think and Jared details a lot of this in his writings. Billionaires don't care about you, says Rich. We're just a bunch of ants to them. They're creating one big Ponzi scheme and there's zero pushback. I mean, some truth to that. I guess I don't know, let's call it a Ponzi scheme, but yeah, there's definitely, Jared Sexton is terrific. I'll leave you with that, Aurelian says, and you are terrific. You know, I'm a huge fan. The Midnight Kingdom, A History of Power, Paranoia, and the Coming Crisis is the latest book from Jared Yates Sexton, and you should check it out. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll put a link to that book under this video, and you'll be able to get it that way, just one click. But again, The Midnight Kingdom, A History of Power, Paranoia, and the Coming Crisis, Jared Yates Sexton. You know, what a fan I am, and I can't wait to talk to you again. I'm sorry we got to wrap this up right now, but wow, really great to have you on the show, Jared, and I can't wait till you come visit again.
Mark, thanks so much for fighting the fight out there. I really appreciate you.
All right, look forward to seeing you again, my friend. Jared Yates Sexton, yeah. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell, you'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.